So what we're going to discuss briefly in this lesson is what JSON Web Tokens are, often just referred to as JWTs. And if you've never used these before, then I'm just going to run through what these are and why we use them. And if you are familiar with what these are and why we use them, then please skip to the next lesson because you're not going to gain anything from watching this. So if we take a look at what a JSON Web Token is, and this is just a screen capture from a site called jwt.io, which allows us to decode JWT tokens. Now, JWT tokens are strings, and they're made up of three different parts separated by a period. And the first part that we see in red represents the header of the token, and this tells us what the algorithm that was used to encrypt the signature of the token, and the signature is the third part of the token that you can see in blue. And this tells whatever's going to verify this signature what algorithm was used to encrypt the signature. And we have a type in there which says JWT because this is a JSON Web Token. In the pinky purple part of this string is the payload. What are we going to send back inside this token? Now, what we can add to our tokens is claims about a user. So a user could claim that their name identifier in this example is Bob. We can add as many claims as we want inside this token. So we could also add things like their email address. We could add things like their date of birth. We could add things like their ID, their username. Whatever we want to put inside a token, we can put inside it. There's just one thing to bear in mind. Anything you do add in the payload of the token, you might as well be putting in clear text because you do not need to verify the token or validate the token to be able to see what's in the payload. So if you add some confidential information, supposing you added their password hash inside their token, that would be able to be read just like this example here where we've pasted in a token and we're getting the decoded values. You do not put any confidential information inside a token. That's a golden rule. But you do put information in a token about the user's claims, what they claim to have. And a claim is just a thing about a user that claims they have. And I claim my name is Neil, and that would be a claim about myself. Also inside the token payload, we have some date information. MBF stands for not before, when can this token first start being used. We can also add an expiry to the token, what's the latest date this token can be used up until, and also we have the issued at, and that typically is exactly the same as the not before when we issue the token, the date and time the token was issued at. And in the blue portion of the JWT, there's the signature. Now what happens is our server is going to sign the token before it leaves the server. And in order to sign the token, the server is going to use a token key that's stored on the server and never leaves the server. And what we use in JWTs to encrypt them or encrypt this signature is referred to as symmetric security. We use the same key to encrypt the signature as we use to decrypt the signature. And it's very important because symmetric security, it's very important that the token key we use never actually leaves the server and is just about impossible for anybody to work out by brute force. So what we typically use is a very, very long random string to sign our token with. And this token, the string, with its three parts, is sent to the client. And just an overview of what goes on with authentication to the server. If we make a request after we've implemented authentication and we just try and get our activities, then our server, once our endpoints require authentication, if we do not send up a token, then we're going to get a 401 unauthorized back. So in order for a client to get a token, then they're going to need to send a post request to our login endpoint. Now we've already set up the code to do this, but in addition to this, as well as checking the username and password, if it's okay, then we're going to return the user object with that token. If it's not okay, then we're going to return a 401. We've already seen that. And the server's going to send back a response, if successful, of 200, including the JWT token. And the client is going to store the JWT token it's got back. Now, there are places in the browser where we can store information, and local storage is what we'll use to store the token on the client's browser. And local storage is persistent storage. So if the client closes their browser, they restart their computer, our token's still going to be available inside local storage, and we can use that token to go and re-log them in, if you like, after they've been away from our application. So after they have a token, the next stage is for them to pass the token to the server. And we pass the JWT token with every request that we require authentication on. And the token itself gets sent inside an authentication header, and we pass the token up as a bearer token to the server. Now the server is going to validate the token, and it's going to compare the signature using its token key that it has stored on the server to make sure that the token hasn't been modified, hasn't been manipulated in any way, and it's a valid token that the server can authenticate against. And if the token's okay, the server responds okay, along with the activities in this example back to the client. So we send the token up with every request, and as well as not sending confidential information back to the client inside the token, you also don't want your token to be massive. You don't want to include every piece of information you can get your hands on and put it inside the token, because this is going to be sent backwards and forwards, or with every request that we send to the server, we're going to be sending that token. So do think about token size, because this will be an additional thing that you send when you make a request to the server so that you can authenticate that user. Its main priority is to authenticate, but it has some side benefits in the fact that we can include claims inside the token, and we can retrieve that information from the token on the server as well. So a very brief overview of JWTs, and we're going to go ahead and implement them in our application next.